Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars shift back to normal space as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The exploration vessel had been away from human space for 6 months, mapping new star systems beyond the outer rim. His crew was tired but satisfied with their work. They had found 3 potentially habitable worlds and discovered mineral deposits that could supply the colonies for decades. Lisa Brooks, his navigator, checked her instruments and frowned. "Captain, I'm getting strange readings from the communication networks. There's a lot of emergency traffic coming from Earth and the outer colonies." Jake walked over to her station. Lisa had been with him for 3 years and was one of the best navigators in the fleet. If she was worried, there was good reason. "What kind of emergency traffic?" "Military channels are buzzing with activity. I'm seeing recall orders for all exploration ships and emergency sessions being called on Earth." Lisa's fingers moved quickly across her control panel. "Sir, I think something big has happened while we were away." Ryan Carter, the chief engineer, looked up from his workstation. He was a quiet man who preferred machines to people, but he understood the ship's systems better than anyone. "I've been monitoring the background chatter too. Ships are being pulled back from the frontier sectors. That hasn't happened since the border wars 20 years ago." Alex Turner, their weapons specialist, joined the conversation. He was younger than the others, but had proven himself during several dangerous encounters with pirates. "Captain, I'm picking up references to something called an ultimatum. Multiple sources are mentioning Valthuran demands." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The Valthurans were the most powerful species in the galaxy, rulers of an empire that stretched across thousands of star systems. Humans had always maintained careful diplomatic relations with them, trading and keeping to their own territory. The reptilian aliens were ancient and proud, with technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed," Jake ordered, "and get me a connection to Fleet Command as soon as we're in range." The next few hours passed slowly as the Defiant raced toward human space. When they finally established contact with Earth, the news was worse than Jake had feared. Admiral Carol Davis appeared on the main screen, her face grim and tired. She had been Jake's commanding officer years ago and was now one of the highest-ranking officers in the human fleet. "Jake, thank God you're back safely," she said. "We've been trying to reach all our ships in the outer systems. How much do you know about what's been happening?" "Nothing, Admiral. We've been out of contact for the past month during our deep survey mission. What's this about an ultimatum?" Admiral Davis took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, a Valthuran fleet arrived at Earth. Not a small diplomatic mission, but a full battle group with their newest dreadnoughts. Their admiral, a creature named Zethkar, delivered a message to President Martinez and the United Colonies Council. Jake waited, knowing the news would be bad. "The Valthuran High Council has decided that human expansion has gone too far. They claim we're too aggressive, too unpredictable, and growing too fast. They see us as a threat to galactic stability." Admiral Davis paused. "They've given us 30 days to abandon all colonies beyond the Sol system and return to Earth. If we refuse, they will destroy every human settlement in the galaxy." The bridge fell silent. Lisa turned pale while Ryan's hand stopped moving on his controls. Alex gripped his console so hard his knuckles turned white. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the chest. 30 days, he repeated. "Admiral, that's impossible. There are 12 million people living in the outer colonies. We can't evacuate that many people in 30 days even if we wanted to." "I know, Jake. The Valthurans know it too. This isn't really about evacuation. They want us to abandon everything we've built and accept permanent confinement to our home system. They're offering to let us live as long as we never expand again." Jake understood the true nature of the choice. Humanity could survive by accepting slavery, or they could fight and probably die. What has the council decided? The debate has been going on for days. Some colony administrators like Paul Watson from New Terra are pushing for compliance. They argue that losing the colonies is better than losing our entire species. General Kate Sullivan and others are demanding we resist even if it means war. And President Martinez? She's calling for a final vote tomorrow. The preliminary counts suggest we're going to reject the ultimatum. Admiral Davis leaned forward. Jake, if we choose to fight, it's going to be the most unequal war in human history. The Valthorans have been building their military for thousands of years. Their smallest ships are larger than our biggest battleships. Their weapons can crack planets, and their shields can stop anything we can throw at them. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had chosen to spend months in the dark between stars, exploring unknown systems and facing constant danger, all to help humanity grow and expand. The idea of giving up everything they had worked for was unthinkable. Admiral, what are our actual chances if we fight? Honestly, almost zero. But Jake, there's something else. Intelligence reports suggest that other species in the galaxy are watching the situation very carefully. The Valthorans rule through fear and the belief that they're invincible. If humanity fights back, even if we lose, it might inspire others to resist. The next day, the United Colonies Council cast their votes. President Helen Martinez announced the decision to the galaxy. Humanity would not abandon their colonies. They would not accept permanent imprisonment in their home system. They would fight. Admiral Zethkar's response came within hours. His message was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. You have chosen extinction over wisdom. The Valthoran Empire will now demonstrate why we have ruled the galaxy for millennia. Your species will serve as an example to any others who might consider challenging our authority. Jake Morrison and his crew watched the transmission from Earth's orbital defense station. Around them, the human fleet was preparing for war. Ships that had been designed for exploration and trade were being hastily fitted with weapons. Civilians were volunteering for military service. Children were being evacuated from the outer colonies. Captain, Lisa said quietly, do you really think we have a chance? Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, the most powerful military force in the galaxy was preparing to destroy everything humanity had built. Maybe not, Lisa, but some things are worth fighting for, even if you can't win. The first Valthoran attack came exactly 30 days after their ultimatum expired. Commander Steve Hughes was having morning coffee on Kepler Station when the massive alien ships dropped out of hyperspace. The mining station sat on the edge of human territory, processing rare metals from the asteroid fields that surrounded it. Steve had been expecting this moment for weeks, but seeing the enemy fleet still took his breath away. The lead Valthoran dreadnought was over 2 kilometers long, its dark hull covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. Behind it came 4 heavy cruisers and a dozen smaller escort ships. Steve's defense force consisted of 3 frigates and the station's fixed weapons. He knew the mathematics of the situation, but mathematics had never stopped humans before. Darien. Ships, this is Commander Hughes. Execute Defense Plan Alpha. Make every shot count. Steve watched his small fleet move into position. The frigates were fast and maneuverable, designed for patrol duty rather than fleet combat. Their captains were good officers, but they had never faced anything like this. The Valthoran fleet moved with the precision of a machine. Their ships formed a perfect attack formation, advancing at steady speed while their shields shimmered like oil on water. Steve had studied everything the military knew about Valthoran technology, which wasn't much. Their energy weapons could punch through any human armor, and their shields had never been breached by human weapons. The first exchange of fire lasted only minutes. Human missiles and plasma cannons struck the alien shields and simply disappeared, absorbed by energy fields that had been perfected over centuries. The Valthoran response was devastating. Beams of coherent energy sliced through the frigate Courage like it was made of paper. The ship broke apart in a ball of flame, taking 43 crew members with it. Steve gritted his teeth and ordered his remaining ships to close the distance. If their weapons couldn't penetrate the shields at long range, maybe they could find weaknesses up close. The frigate Determination made a desperate attack run, diving between 2 Valthoran cruisers while firing everything it had. For a moment, Steve thought he saw flickers in one of the enemy shields. The moment didn't last. Valthoran gunners tracked the human ship with ease, their weapon systems far more advanced than anything in the human fleet. The Determination lasted longer than the Courage, but the result was the same. Steve watched another good ship and Another good crew disappear into expanding gas and debris. His last frigate, the Persistence, tried a different approach. Captain Jane Foster took her ship into the asteroid field, using the massive rocks for cover while launching hit-and-run attacks. The Valtherans followed, their larger ships moving more carefully among the asteroids. For the first time, Steve saw the aliens making mistakes. Their ships were too big for this kind of fighting, and their tactical computers seemed confused by the chaotic environment. Captain Foster managed to get close enough to one of the escort ships to score actual hits. Her plasma cannons found a gap between shield generators and burned through alien armor. The Valtharan ship didn't explode, but it pulled back from the fight, trailing atmosphere and debris. Steve felt a surge of hope. They could hurt the enemy after all. The hope died when the Valtharan dreadnought entered the asteroid field. The massive ship simply ignored the rocks, using its forward shields to smash through obstacles that would have destroyed a human vessel. Its main guns locked onto the Persistence and fired once. Captain Foster and her crew vanished in a flash of light that briefly outshone the local sun. Steve was alone now, commanding a mining station against a fleet that had just demonstrated why the Valtharan Empire ruled the galaxy. His weapons were designed to break up asteroids, not fight warships. His shields were meant to stop cosmic radiation, not military-grade energy weapons. By any reasonable measure, the battle was over. But Steve Hughes was human, and humans had never been particularly reasonable. He activated the station's mining charges, turning the entire facility into a massive bomb. As the Valtharan fleet closed in for the kill, he sent one last message to Earth. "This is Kepler Station. We held them for 2 hours and destroyed one escort ship. The enemy shields can be breached at close range, and their big ships don't maneuver well in tight spaces. Tell Admiral Davis that humans don't surrender. Hughes out." The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, Kepler Station was gone, along with Commander Hughes and his crew. But the Valtharan fleet had also lost an escort ship, and their dreadnought carried scorch marks on its hull. For the first time in centuries, Valtharan blood had been spilled in combat. Admiral Zethkar studied the battle reports with growing confusion. His tactical computers insisted that the humans should have surrendered immediately upon seeing his fleet. The primitive species had no weapons that could threaten Valtharan ships, no shields that could stop Valtharan guns, and no tactical experience that could match Valtharan military science. Yet they had fought to the last ship and the last shot. The loss of an escort ship was embarrassing but not critical. What worried Admiral Zethkar was the willingness of humans to die rather than surrender. In his 1,000 years of military service, he had conquered dozens of species. All of them had eventually seen reason and accepted Valtharan rule. Humans seemed to lack this basic survival instinct. On Earth, Admiral Carol Davis received Commander Hughes's final transmission and immediately called a meeting of her senior staff. The loss of Kepler Station was a blow, but the intelligence Hughes had provided was invaluable. Human weapons could penetrate Valtharan shields at close range, and their large ships had mobility problems in confined spaces. Captain Jake Morrison attended the meeting via secure communication from the UES Defiant. His ship was part of a small task force conducting hit-and-run attacks on Valtharan supply lines. The work was dangerous and mostly ineffective, but it was keeping some human ships in the fight. "Admiral, my engineer Ryan Carter has been analyzing the sensor data from Kepler Station," Jake reported. "He thinks the Valtharan shields operate on rotating frequencies. If we can predict the rotation pattern, we might be able to time our attacks for maximum effect." Admiral Davis nodded. Human scientists had been working around the clock to find weaknesses in Valtharan technology. Dr. Linda Ross, the head of the Military Research Division, had been studying captured alien equipment from the escort ship that Hughes had damaged. "Dr. Ross, what have you learned from the wreckage?" Admiral Davis asked. The scientist appeared on another screen, her laboratory visible behind her. She looked exhausted but excited. "Admiral, Valtharan technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly specialized. Their systems are designed to work perfectly within specific parameters. When those parameters change, they don't adapt well. What does that mean for us?" "It means we need to fight differently than they expect. Conventional fleet tactics play to their strengths. But if we can force them into situations their computers haven't been programmed for, we might have a chance. Over. The following weeks, human tactics began to evolve. Small groups of ships would attack from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing Valtheran defenders to split their attention. Mining charges and industrial equipment were converted into weapons that operated outside normal military parameters. Human pilots began using kamikaze attacks, trading their lives for damage to enemy ships. The Valtharans responded by bringing in more ships, including some of their oldest and most powerful vessels. Admiral Zethkar requested additional fleets from the Empire's core worlds, admitting for the first time that the human conflict was requiring more resources than originally planned. On the colony world of Haven, civilian scientist Dr. Linda Ross worked in an underground laboratory while Valtheran ships bombarded the surface above. Her team had managed to capture and study several pieces of advanced alien technology. What they discovered would change the course of the war. Valtheran computers thought in patterns that had been refined over thousands of years. They were incredibly efficient, but also predictable. Human brains, being younger and more chaotic, could interface with these systems in ways that confused and damaged them. Dr. Ross began developing a computer virus that could spread through captured Valtheran equipment. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening across human space. Instead of the panic and surrender that Admiral Zethkar expected, every human world was digging in for a long fight. Farmers were learning to use military equipment. Miners were turning their tools into weapons. Even children were contributing to the war effort by helping with logistics and communications. The Valtheran Empire had ruled the galaxy for millennia through superior technology and the fear of their military might. They had never encountered a species that refused to acknowledge their superiority. Humans were supposed to be primitive and weak, but they kept fighting with a determination that made no logical sense. Admiral Carol Davis reviewed the casualty reports and knew that humanity was losing the war. They had lost half their military, ships, and dozens of colonies. Millions of humans were dead or displaced. By any reasonable measure, they should surrender and accept whatever terms the Valtharans offered. But humans had never been particularly good at being reasonable. 6 months into the war, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the wreckage of what had once been a Valtheran supply depot. His strike team had spent 3 weeks planning this raid, studying patrol patterns and defense schedules. The depot had been hidden in an asteroid field, protected by what the aliens thought was perfect camouflage. They hadn't counted on human stubborn curiosity. Lisa Brooks had found the depot by accident while analyzing navigation data from destroyed Valtharan ships. She noticed that several enemy vessels had made course corrections near the same coordinates, always when they thought no human ships were watching. It was a small detail that Valtharan computers would have dismissed as random, but Lisa's human brain saw the pattern. The raid itself had been a nightmare of close quarters fighting through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. Alex Turner had led the assault team, using human agility to move through spaces where Valtharan soldiers couldn't follow. Ryan Carter had hacked into their computer systems, downloading terabytes of intelligence data before the aliens could destroy it. Now Jake studied the captured information on a portable display, while his team finished planting charges throughout the facility. The intelligence was beyond valuable. Supply routes, fleet positions, command codes, and most importantly, detailed technical specifications for Valtharan equipment. This data could change the entire war. "Captain, charges are set," Alex reported. His armor was scorched from plasma fire and he moved with the careful precision of someone nursing injuries. "We should be clear of the blast radius in 10 minutes. Jake nodded and activated his communicator. "All teams, this is Morrison. Package secured, moving to extraction point. Prepare for immediate departure." The explosion behind them lit up the asteroid field like a small sun. Another Valtharan supply depot was gone, along with enough equipment to supply a small fleet. But more importantly, the intelligence they had captured was already being transmitted to human research facilities across the galaxy. Dr. Linda Ross received the data while working in her underground laboratory on Haven. The colony was still under siege, with Valthuran ships maintaining a constant bombardment of the surface. But her research team had adapted, moving their equipment into deep caves and abandoned mines. They had learned to work while the ground shook from orbital bombardment. The captured technical data confirmed what Linda had suspected about Valthuran technology. Their systems were incredibly advanced but also incredibly rigid. Every piece of equipment was designed to work with every other piece in perfect harmony. Change one component, and the entire network could become unstable. "Dr. Ross, you need to see this," called out her assistant, a young engineer named Peter Walsh. He was studying the communications protocols that Ryan Carter had downloaded from the depot. Their command network uses biological neural interfaces. The entire fleet communicates through what's essentially a living computer network. Linda hurried over to Peter's workstation. If the Valthuran fleet used biological computers, then her virus could be far more effective than she had originally hoped. Instead of just disrupting individual systems, it could spread through their entire command structure like a disease. "How quickly can we modify the virus to target their neural networks?" she asked. "Give me 48 hours, Peter replied. "But Dr. Ross, if this works, it won't just disable their ships. It could cripple their entire military command structure." While Linda's team worked on their breakthrough, Admiral Carol Davis was coordinating the largest human fleet operation since the war began. Intelligence suggested that the Valthurans were massing ships near the New Angeles system, preparing for a major offensive. Instead of waiting to be attacked, Davis had decided to strike first. The human fleet that assembled near New Angeles was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Traditional military vessels flew alongside converted cargo ships, mining barges fitted with missile launchers, and civilian transports carrying experimental weapons. It looked more like a ragtag militia than a proper fleet, which was exactly what Admiral Davis wanted. Captain Jake Morrison brought the UES Defiant into formation with the other ships. His vessel had been modified extensively over the past months. With additional weapon systems and experimental shield generators, Lisa Brooks had become expert at coordinating with other human ships using unconventional formations that confused Valthuran tactical computers. "All ships, this is Admiral Davis," came the transmission across the fleet channels. "Intelligence indicates the enemy is expecting a traditional defensive action. Instead, we're going to show them what human creativity looks like. Remember, we don't have to win this battle. We just have to make them pay for every inch." The Valthuran fleet that emerged from hyperspace was massive. Admiral Zethkar himself commanded from the bridge of his flagship, an ancient dreadnought that had conquered entire star systems. He had brought the equivalent of 3 full battle groups, enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. The human fleet facing him looked pathetic by comparison. But Admiral Zethkar had learned to be cautious when dealing with humans. Their tactics made no sense according to Valthuran military doctrine, but they had proven effective in smaller engagements. He ordered his fleet to advance slowly, maintaining perfect formation and expecting the humans to either flee or die quickly. The human fleet did neither. Instead, they scattered in all directions like a flock of startled birds. Some ships dove toward the system's star, using solar radiation to mask their approach. Others headed for the outer asteroid belts, disappearing among the rocks. A few seemed to be fleeing the battle entirely, only to loop back and attack from unexpected angles. Admiral Zethkar's tactical computers couldn't process what they were seeing. Valthuran military doctrine was based on thousands of years of successful campaigns against organized fleets. The humans weren't fighting like a fleet at all. They were fighting like individuals who happened to share a common enemy. Lisa Brooks piloted a modified bomber through a flight path that should have been impossible. She used the gravity wells of 3 different moons to slingshot her ship past Valthuran defensive fire, approaching the enemy flagship from directly beneath where their shields were weakest. Her cargo bay carried a single weapon. Dr. Linda, Ross's computer virus packaged in a delivery system that Ryan Carter had designed. The Valthuran point defense systems tracked her approach, but couldn't predict her chaotic flight pattern. Lisa's bomber was too small and too fast, and her human reflexes let her react to threats faster than alien computers could calculate firing solutions. She reached the flagship's shield perimeter and released her payload before the Veltharans even realized she was there. The virus struck the flagship's neural network like lightning. Within seconds, it had spread through the biological computers that controlled everything from weapons to life support. Veltharan crew members watched in horror as their most advanced systems began to fail randomly. The virus didn't just disrupt their technology. It attacked their fundamental assumptions about how technology should work. Admiral Zethkar felt his ship shudder as primary systems went offline. His tactical display flickered and died, leaving him blind in the middle of a battle. Around him, junior officers reported system failures throughout the fleet as the virus spread from ship to ship through their communication networks. For the first time in his 1,000-year career, Admiral Zethkar experienced something he had never felt before: uncertainty. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had turned Veltharan technology against itself, using methods that violated every principle of proper military science. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships attacked in seemingly random patterns while Veltharan vessels struggled with failing systems. Captain Morrison coordinated a group of converted cargo ships in an assault on a heavy cruiser, their improvised weapons proving more effective than purpose-built military hardware. The turning point came when the virus reached the Veltharan flagship's main computer core. The ancient neural network that had coordinated fleet operations for centuries suddenly began broadcasting human tactical data to every ship in the enemy formation. Veltharan captains found themselves receiving orders in languages they didn't understand, from computers they no longer trusted. Admiral Zethkar ordered a general retreat, but half his fleet couldn't receive the command. The other half couldn't verify that the order was genuine. For the first time in millennia, a Veltharan fleet fled from battle in complete disorder. The human victory at New Angeles was more than just a military success. Word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy faster than light-speed communication could carry it. Species that had lived under Veltharan rule for centuries suddenly learned that the Empire could be defeated. Their ships could be destroyed, their technology could be turned against them, and their admirals could be made to run. On dozens of worlds, resistance movements that had been dormant for generations began to stir. The Zephyrian mathematicians started sharing encrypted communications with human scientists. The crystalline Korath began developing new weapons technologies. The insectoid Threx offered to share their knowledge of biological warfare. The planet Harmony had been one of humanity's most peaceful colonies, a world of rolling green hills and vast agricultural complexes that fed 3 star systems. 2 million people lived there, mostly farmers and their families who had never seen military action. When the Veltharan planet killer arrived in orbit, the colonists had no way to defend themselves. Admiral Zethkar watched from his flagship as the ancient weapon charged its primary systems. The planet killer was one of the Empire's most feared tools, a massive vessel designed for a single purpose: the complete destruction of entire worlds. It had been used sparingly over the centuries, reserved for species that absolutely refused to accept Veltharan rule. "Admiral, the weapon is ready to fire," reported his tactical officer. The young Veltharan showed no emotion as he prepared to murder 2 million civilians. In their culture, the destruction of inferior species was simply a tool of statecraft. Zethkar activated the fleet communication system, broadcasting his message to every human world within range. "This is the consequence of your continued resistance. Harmony will serve as an example to any who would defy the Empire. Surrender now, or watch as we reduce every human world to ash," the planet killer fired once. A beam of coherent energy struck Harmony's surface and burrowed deep into the planetary core. Within minutes, the entire world convulsed as its crust cracked and its atmosphere boiled away. 2 million human voices were silenced forever, their only crime being their species' refusal to accept slavery. But instead of terrorizing humanity into submission, the destruction of Harmony had the opposite effect. The images of a dying world spread across every communication network in the galaxy, viewed by trillions of beings who had lived under Veltharan rule for centuries. Many of these species had lost their own worlds to planet killers, but the images had been suppressed by Imperial censorship. Now they saw the reality of Veltharan power displayed in all its terrible glory. A peaceful, agricultural world turned to molten rock because its people dared to dream of freedom. The Empire's mask of benevolent rule was stripped away, revealing the brutality that had always lurked beneath. Captain Jake Morrison received word of Harmony's destruction while commanding a joint task force that included ships from 6 different species. His human vessels flew alongside Zephyrian cruisers, Korath crystal ships, and Threx biovessels. The diversity that Veltharan saw as weakness had become humanity's greatest strength. Captain, we're receiving priority communications from Rebel commanders across the galaxy, Lisa Brooks reported. Her navigation station had been modified to coordinate with alien computer systems, a task that would have been impossible before the war. 17 worlds have declared independence from the Empire in the past 6 hours. They're all requesting human tactical advisors and virus samples. Jake studied the tactical display showing rebel movements throughout Veltharan space. What had started as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become something much larger. The destruction of Harmony had been intended to demonstrate the Empire's power, but instead it proved that the Veltharans were afraid enough to resort to genocide. Alex, what's our weapon status? Jake asked his tactical officer. Alex Turner checked his displays, which now showed a bewildering mix of human, Zephyrian, and Korath weapon systems. All systems operational, Captain. The new Zephyrian shield generators are integrating well with our existing defenses. The Korath have also provided us with some interesting offensive options. The Korath were crystalline beings who thought in mathematical concepts that human minds could barely comprehend. Their weapon systems operated on principles that seemed like magic to other species, manipulating quantum fields and probability matrices. Combined with human tactical flexibility and Zephyrian computational power, they created weapons that no single species could have developed alone. Dr. Linda Ross worked around the clock in her new laboratory, a joint research facility hidden in an asteroid field that served rebels from dozens of species. The virus she had originally created to target Veltharan neural networks had evolved far beyond her original design. Zephyrian mathematicians had enhanced its algorithms, Korath scientists had added quantum resonance components, and Threx biotechnicians had made it capable of adapting to any defense system. Dr. Ross, the latest virus variant is ready for field testing, announced her research partner, a Zephyrian mathematician whose name humans couldn't pronounce. The aliens' communication came through a translation device that converted mathematical concepts into human language. The probability matrices suggest a 97% chance of successful penetration of Veltharan command networks. Linda nodded, studying the data on screens that displayed information in 3 different alien formats simultaneously. How quickly can we distribute it to the rebel fleets? Distribution networks are already in place, replied another team member, a Threx bioengineer whose insectoid form towered over the human scientists. Our courier ships can reach 47 rebel worlds within 72 hours. The cooperation between different species would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Each race had evolved different languages, different technologies, and different ways of thinking about the universe. But the threat of Veltharan oppression had forced them to find common ground, creating the largest collaborative effort in galactic history. General Kate Sullivan had been promoted to Supreme, commander of the Free Worlds Alliance, a military coalition that grew larger every day. Her headquarters was located on a massive space station that had been constructed in secret over the past months. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with sections designed by different species working together. General, we're receiving reports of successful operations on multiple fronts, reported Colonel Danny Brooks, one of her human staff officers. The joint strike against the Veltharan supply base at Kepler 7 was a complete success. The rebel fleet lost only 3 ships while destroying an entire logistics hub. Kate studied the tactical displays that showed rebel activities across the galaxy. What amazed her most was not the military success, but the speed at which different species were learning to work together. Humans provided tactical innovation and adaptability. Zephyrians contributed superior mathematics and computational power. Korath offered advanced physics and quantum manipulation. Threx brought biological, warfare expertise and resilience. Colonel, what's the status of our planned assault on the Valtheran capital system? The fleet is almost ready, General. We'll have forces from 47 different species, representing the largest military coalition in galactic history. Admiral, Davis is coordinating the human contingent, while the alien commanders handle their own forces. The idea of attacking the Valtheran home system would have been pure fantasy months ago. Now it seemed not just possible but inevitable. The Empire's military forces were scattered across thousands of worlds, trying to suppress rebellions that sprouted faster than they could be contained. Their command structure was compromised by virus attacks that grew more sophisticated every day. Emperor Vyexthul sat in his ancient throne room, reviewing reports that grew more disturbing by the hour. The destruction of harmony was supposed to end the rebellion by demonstrating the price of resistance. Instead, it had sparked the largest uprising in the Empire's history. Worlds that had been loyal for millennia were suddenly declaring independence. Your Majesty, we've lost contact with the Outer Rim territories, reported his military advisor, a scarred veteran whose loyalty was absolute. The rebels have established independent communication networks that we cannot penetrate or monitor. The Emperor's scaled fingers drummed against his throne as he contemplated options that all seemed equally hopeless. His military was designed to fight conventional wars against organized fleets, not galaxy-wide insurgencies coordinated by dozens of different species. The humans had introduced chaos into his perfectly ordered universe. What of Admiral Zethkar's recommendation to use more planet killers? The Admiral believes that destroying 10 or 12 rebel worlds would end the uprising, Your Majesty. However, intelligence suggests that such actions might actually increase resistance rather than reduce it. Emperor Vyexthul understood the dilemma. The Empire's power had always been based on the threat of overwhelming force rather than its actual use. Most species surrendered when faced with Valtharan military might, accepting subjugation rather than extinction. But humans seemed to respond to threats by becoming more determined to fight. Meanwhile, Admiral Carol Davis was coordinating preparations for what would either be humanity's greatest triumph or their final battle. The combined rebel fleet was the largest military force ever assembled, but it would be attacking the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. The Valtheran home system contained not just their capital world, but their primary shipyards, research facilities, and command centers. Admiral, the alien fleet commanders are reporting ready status, Captain Morrison informed her from the bridge of his ship. All forces are in position and waiting for your signal. Carol looked out at the assembled fleet through her flagship's main display. Human ships flew alongside vessels from species she had never heard of 6 months ago. The Valtheran home system was a fortress that had never fallen in 10,000 years of galactic history. Massive defense platforms orbited the primary star, each one larger than most starships and armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The capital world itself was protected by energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts and surrounded by automated defense networks that had been perfected over millennia. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant as the combined rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Around him, ships from 47 different species formed the largest military force ever assembled. Human vessels flew alongside Zephyrian mathematics ships, Korath crystal formations, and Threx biovessels that looked more like living creatures than machines. Captain, I'm reading massive defensive formations throughout the system, Lisa Brooks reported from her navigation station. The Valtherans have pulled ships from across their empire to defend this place. I count over 3,000 vessels of various classes. Jake studied the tactical display, knowing that the numbers were even worse than they appeared. Each Valtheran ship was individually more powerful than most rebel vessels, and their defensive positions had been chosen by military minds with thousands of years of experience. This wasn't just a battle, it was an assault on the most heavily fortified system in galactic history. All ships, this is Admiral Davis, came the transmission across the fleet channels. Remember that we're not here to conquer the Valtheran Empire. We're here to prove that it can be defeated. Every ship that survives today carries the hope of freedom back to their home worlds. The first phase of the battle began when Zephyrian stealth ships, invisible to most sensors, penetrated the outer defensive perimeter and began transmitting targeting data. The rebels had learned that traditional fleet tactics played to Veltharan's strengths, so they had developed something entirely new, a coordinated chaos that no military computer could predict or counter. Human ships dove toward the system's star, using solar radiation to mask their approach while launching long-range missile strikes. Korath vessels phased in and out of normal space, appearing just long enough to fire quantum disruption beams before vanishing again. Threk's bioships released clouds of specialized organisms that attacked Veltharan computer systems like a plague. Admiral Zethkar commanded the defensive fleet from his massive flagship, watching in growing confusion as the rebel attack developed. His tactical computers were designed to counter organized military formations, not the seemingly random chaos that the enemy was employing. Ships appeared and disappeared without pattern, attacking from directions that made no strategic sense. Admiral, the outer defense platforms are reporting system failures, his tactical officer announced. The biological agents released by the Threx vessels are interfacing with our neural networks in ways we cannot counter. Zethkar snarled in frustration. The rebels were using weapons and tactics that violated every principle of proper warfare. Their biological attacks were particularly disturbing, as they turned the Veltharan Empire's greatest strength, their integrated computer networks, into a vulnerability. Dr. Linda Ross watched the battle from her mobile research platform, a converted cargo ship that carried the most advanced computer systems the rebellion could assemble. Her virus, now enhanced by the greatest scientific minds from dozens of species, was spreading through the Veltharan defense network like wildfire. Every infected system became a new point of entry for rebel forces. Dr. Ross, the virus has penetrated the primary command center on the capital world, reported Peter Walsh, her human assistant. We're receiving direct access to their central military computers. Linda's fingers moved quickly across her control interface, which displayed information in formats designed for human Zephyrian and Korath minds simultaneously. The virus was performing better than she had dared hope, not just disrupting Veltharan systems but actively recruiting them to the rebel cause. Peter, can we access their planetary defense grid? Working on it now. The Korath quantum algorithms are interfacing with their shield generators. If this works, we might be able to create gaps in their planetary defenses. The turning point came when Ryan Carter, working with a team of Zephyrian engineers, developed a breakthrough that should have been impossible. They discovered a way to use smaller ships to punch through Veltharan super shields by synchronizing their attacks across multiple dimensions. The technique required perfect timing and coordination between different species, something that should have been impossible given their different technologies and thought processes. Yet, the Free Worlds Alliance pulled it off repeatedly, turning the Empire's technological advantages into liabilities. Veltharan shields that had protected worlds for millennia suddenly became useless against attacks that came from directions their designers had never considered. Captain Morrison led a strike force of mixed human and alien ships through a gap in the planetary defenses that Dr. Ross had created. Their target was the central command complex where Emperor Vaxthul himself directed the defense of his empire. The flight through the atmosphere was a nightmare of anti-aircraft fire and defensive fighters, but human agility combined with alien technology proved superior to Veltharan military science. The ground assault on the command complex was led by Alex Turner, coordinating troops from a dozen different species in urban combat that no military academy had ever taught. Human soldiers fought alongside Threx warriors whose natural armor could stop energy weapons, while Korath support units phased through walls to attack from unexpected directions. Emperor Vaxthul watched his empire crumble from his throne room deep within the command complex. Reports flooded in from across his domain, worlds declaring independence, fleets defecting to the rebels, entire sectors falling to forces that fought with tactics no Veltharan could understand or counter. The virus created by the human scientist had spread beyond his military networks into the very foundations of imperial society. Your Majesty, the rebels have breached the outer defenses, his bodyguard captain reported. We must evacuate you to the emergency bunkers. But Emperor Vaexthul remained seated on his ancient throne, understanding at last what the humans had unleashed upon his galaxy. It wasn't just a military rebellion, it was the end of the old order itself. The rigid hierarchies and careful controls that had maintained Veltharan dominance for millennia were dissolving in the face of chaos that grew stronger rather than weaker with each victory. "No," the Emperor said quietly. "I will not flee from primitives who should have been extinct months ago." His final transmission to the galaxy was both a warning and a surrender. The Empire dies today, destroyed not by superior force, but by the chaos that these humans represent. They have taught the galaxy that order can be overthrown, that hierarchy can be challenged, that even the mightiest can fall. May you all learn to live with the consequences. Emperor Vaexthul died at his throne, not from enemy weapons, but from the realization that his 10,000-year empire had been defeated by beings who had learned to fly between stars only centuries ago. His death was not mourned, even by his own people, who had grown tired of serving a system that offered them nothing but the privilege of oppressing others. The battle for the Veltharan home system continued for another week, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Rebel forces systematically dismantled the defensive networks while virus attacks crippled the remaining loyalist ships. More importantly, worlds throughout the Empire were declaring independence faster than anyone could count. Admiral Carol Davis coordinated the final phases of the operation from her flagship, managing a fleet that had grown to include defecting Veltharan vessels, whose crews had chosen freedom over loyalty to a dead empire. The sight of alien ships fighting alongside human vessels would have been unthinkable months ago, but the rebellion had changed everything. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender offers from the remaining Veltharan commanders," Captain Morrison reported. "They're requesting terms for a negotiated end to hostilities." Carol considered the offer carefully. The rebellion had achieved far more than anyone had thought possible, but the cost in lives and resources had been enormous. "Tell them we'll accept the surrender of any forces that recognize the independence of all rebel worlds and agree to participate in a new galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination." The war officially ended 6 months later with the signing of the Galactic Charter of Free Worlds. The document, negotiated on Earth and signed by representatives from hundreds of species, established principles that would have seemed impossible before the rebellion. Voluntary cooperation between equals, shared technology and resources, and absolute prohibition on the conquest or subjugation of other worlds. Dr. Linda Ross found herself appointed as the first director of the Galactic Research Institute, a cooperative organization that brought together the greatest scientific minds from across the galaxy. Her office, located on a space station that orbited between Earth and the former Veltharan capital, received visitors from species she was still learning to pronounce. "Dr. Ross, the Andromedan delegation has arrived for the Quantum Mechanics Symposium," her assistant informed her.